Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for attending tonight. This is Key Strategies for College Soccer Recruiting in 2020. Welcome to everyone. I want to thank USYS and Trace Soccer for putting this event together for us this evening. This will be recorded and you can access this on Trace's YouTube channel in a couple of hours after the conclusion of the event. My name is Tim Bennett, and I'm a Trace implementation specialist. But really, what that means is I'm a coach. I spent over 20 years coaching Division I college soccer. I coached in such conferences as the SEC, Pac-12, Big 12, a couple of others in between. I also was a development academy director, an ECNL coach. I was a USYS national champion as a coach twice, and runner-up once. So I've been on a lot of sides of our youth soccer, and I'm also now the proud parent of a future Division I college athlete. So the recruiting process is something that I can now say I've been on every side possible. I'm very passionate about the education of the recruiting process to players and parents in order to help them achieve their college dreams, just as I help my son kind of navigate through it. But I'm also really passionate about the use of technology for soccer player and team development. And that's what my role at Trace allows me to do. It allows me to combine my two favorite passions. And what Trace is a soccer video technology platform that uses a robot camera, GPS sensors, and a powerful software to film games and create personalized moments for every player automatically. No editing required. All right, so these are the topics that I wanted to get into this evening. I really want players to understand the current COVID recruiting landscape. It is vastly different and has changed permanently over the last just short 6-7 months as we've all kind of been dealing with this pandemic. I want to really kind of get into video in this new landscape, the importance of context, what the video incorporates basically, and then how to maximize it, how to really use it to a player's advantage in this process. And then at the end, I'd also like to touch upon just a little bit of the importance of social media in this new landscape. So before we begin to understand how players can use video to help with their recruitment, we need to have a working knowledge of the current recruiting landscape. Live evaluation opportunities are at a minimum, so we've got to find a way to recreate these in-person opportunities. We know that Division I has extended their dead period to July 15th, 2021. We know that Division II, III, NAIA, junior colleges are all on their normal recruiting calendar, which essentially means they're able to recruit on and off campus, except for maybe some subjective COVID policy and other financial constraints. This Division I extension has ripple effects to the lower divisions, rightly or wrongly. Most players want to play at the Division I level and will hold on until that works itself out. So this extension naturally delays the process across all divisions. We all have experienced firsthand the impact of COVID-19 on the youth soccer scene with canceled training, games, events, leagues, etc. Live events, tournaments are at a minimum, very, very scarce, and vary across the country. COVID has also had a great impact or a great effect on college soccer, especially on the financial side of things. 29 NCAA men's and women's soccer programs have been cut. That's about 900 playing opportunities for both genders. Further impact has been made specifically on their recruiting budgets. What that means for players is that coaches won't have as much money to attend events in person for live evaluation as often as they've had in years past. Secondly, this financial effect, they might not be able to send additional coaches to cover these events. So with this reduction in recruiting opportunities, we have to find a way to recreate these missed live events with as much context as possible in order to solve these kind of new recruiting COVID landscape changes. So the next question is how do we recreate an in-person recruiting opportunity? Online video is the simple answer, but it's much more complex than that. Prior to COVID, video was not necessarily an essential part of the recruiting process. Coaches had money in their budgets to go out and see players play live or host ID camps. If video was part of that earlier process, it usually was just a highlight reel, which doesn't really do an adequate job of recreating those missing personal evaluations or in-person evaluations. It's essentially an incomplete picture of a player. It's just a list of their best moments, their greatest moments. And we know that no player plays perfectly. So how can you recruit off of basically an imperfect, perfect list? And it's also a very stagnant picture of a player. It's a snapshot. And in many ways, you're probably better off just sending a selfie than an old school highlight reel. If highlight reels weren't sent to college coaches, it usually was just a full game video. And we know in this day and age with ESPN, nobody watches full games anymore. So given this new COVID influenced landscape, college coaches want and need more than that. They need a lot more information to make essentially an equal virtual identification to an in-person identification. And so what's missing is complete context. So what is context? Context is simply providing college coaches with enough information to make an evaluation based on 4 elements. The 4 elements of the game. College coaches have got to be able to see players' technical ability, the skills, dribbling, passing, first touch, receiving, short range distribution, long range distribution, heading, shooting, etc. They also need information about the tactical aspect of a player's game, those individual decision-making abilities. The third element required for a college evaluation is the physical, the athleticism, and the soccer-specific athleticism. And then the last, and often the most important piece to a college coach's evaluation is the academic side of things. Their GPA, ACT, SAT score, possible college major, and then possible post-career goals, aspirations. And so at Trace, we try to recreate those live evaluation, those missed live evaluation experience for college coaches through our virtual identification feature called Trace ID. Trace ID provides coaches with an individual highlight moment playlist, a full game library, player performance data, and academic and personal information. It basically provides a complete context all in one platform. And in fact, Trace ID gives college coaches a lot more information to make an identification than they've had previously, right? So how does Trace do it? Let me show you what I mean here. So what you see on your screen now, this is a completed Trace ID. This is as I mentioned, this is a feature within Trace that allows players to showcase themselves. There are 4 basic elements to a Trace ID. There's moments, matches, stats, and about section. The moments section, this is a playlist. This playlist is created by players going back to their Trace games, picking out individual moments, spotlighting them, tagging them, and ordering them on their playlist. So it is their playlist. This is the part of the evaluation that will hold college coaches' attention. Will get them to stay and begin to evaluate a little bit more. We've also given college coaches a unique feature on Trace ID to help kind of recreate those live versions. We've given college coaches the ability to navigate inside this platform to see this exact second in this moment in the full game, where they can go forward 5 minutes, back 10 minutes, and create as much game-like context virtually as they want to without ever leaving the platform. The next section is the match library. The last 5 games, 5 full games, are automatically updated in a player's Trace ID, giving college coach the ability to track back long-term, watch full games if they're obviously not able to be there live. The next 2 sections, the final 2 sections, are the statistics, the player performance data. And this is also over their last 5 most recent games. What this does for the evaluation is this gives a college coach the ability to see some objective view of athleticism and soccer-specific athleticism. That was always kind of the knock against video when it came to identification, was you can never really get an idea about what type of an athlete that particular player is. This player performance data gives a very objective view of that and allows, I think, a really good evaluation of athleticism. The last section is the about section, the academic side of things. So there's team information within a Trace ID, GPA, standardized testing, and also the bio. And this is a really important section for a college coach. This is where a player can present as much of themselves for college coaches, what they want to do athletically, what they are like as a leader, what they do off the field, highlights, academic highlights, community service things, anything that they want to add, they can put in this. And so if you think back to those 4 elements of a college coach's evaluation, we've checked every box in this one platform. So through the individual playlist of moments and full game video, we can get a really good idea of a player technically and tactically. And we can navigate back and forth between the playlist and the full game, creating as much context as we want. Through the player performance data, we can get a qualitative view of a player's overall athleticism. And in the about section, we can get those academic and personal details. I think it's great that USYS is helping their players by providing video for particular events. I think this is a great first step. The next couple of steps are up to players. They're the ones that now kind of have to kind of take over this work of creating a highlight and sending it out. Trace, we do things a little bit differently. We combine it and make it very easy for players to share and distribute in order to help them achieve their collegiate dreams. Charles, we have any questions about Trace ID so far?
Yeah, I think we have one that's kind of related. When you're creating a highlight reel, should you be highlighting specific strengths based on your position as a player? And does Trace ID allow you to do that?
Yeah, good question. So within a playlist, and particularly within a Trace playlist, a Trace ID playlist, the order is really important of those moments. Within a Trace ID, you can have as many individual moments as you want. The first 5 moments we are finding through our analysis are the most important. And not just because they're the first 5, but because they're the ones that define each player. They are the ones that showcase those position-specific skills and those skills that are going to translate well to the next level. So for instance, if you are a number 9, if you're a target striker, within your first 5 moments, you probably need to include 3 different types of goals. Some movement off the ball, some 1v1. If you are a winger, if you're 7 or 11, 2 to 3 moments of 1v1 ability, some services, some assists. And so it is, you want to make sure that you're showcasing really early in the playlist those skills that are going to hold that college coach's attention and allow them or create a little bit more, I don't know, staying power so that they can continue to review your playlist or navigate back and forth between the playlist and the full game library? Good question.
And Tim, should you include clips from where a player maybe made a mistake to show coaches that you can come back from the mistake and not put your head down?
So with Trace ID, and you're right, I think that question kind of alludes to full context. A lot of the times when college coaches are sitting there in their canvas chairs and watching games, they're not just watching your best example or best moment. They're watching players recover from adversity. If they make a mistake, how do they recover? What is their decision? What is their body language like? Nobody can play perfectly. And that's what highlight reels are perfect moments, and we are imperfect players. And so having the ability to hold or grab a college coach's attention with a playlist, and then having them navigate to the full game where they can see those moments, those off the ball moments, those dealing with adversity moments, really is an ideal situation for them. They kind of get the best of both worlds.
Got it. And how does Trace actually get the stats of the game?
Good. That's a fun question. So each player wears a tracer on the back of their calf on their dominant leg. And within that tracer are 3 specific sensors that gather this data. After the game is completed, the players return the tracer to a trace case and then the camera, all the data is all uploaded. Everything is broken down and then delivered within 12 to 14 hours through an email link to the player's email address.
Great. And we have a few more technical questions, but we're going to get to those a little bit later, or we might email you those directly if we can't get to them in this session. But Tim, you can go on.
Okay. Well, let's switch out of Trace ID and let's go to how to maximize it. It's one thing having the right platform to showcase yourself virtually, but that's only part of the solution to this new recruiting landscape. The next step is to make sure you share it in a way that maximizes this video. Most players send or resend the same highlight video over and over again, which defeats the purpose, largely because they spend an awful lot of time trying to make these things, and that gets difficult within, the normal student athlete's day, right? But this is what most players do. Or players make one highlight at the end of the season that has like 6 months of video, or comprised of over 6 months of video, and that's still not ideal. They're all very stagnant pictures of a player. And now with the missed live opportunities, college coaches need more. So this video solution has to provide more. So this new landscape requires fresh content of your moments and games. Coaches want to see a player over the course of time, long-term and short-term, to better gauge their development and potential fit to the program. We know what the shutdown has done for college soccer. These coaches haven't seen players in a long time. So being able to find a way to present this long-term development and the short-term development solves that issue right up front. A player must constantly hold the college coach's attention week in and week out over multiple games and against varied opponents. And this is really important. Most players send in 1 email or 2 email, and they try to kind of garner an opportunity or an evaluation that way. Well, technology is different. The landscape is different. That players now must kind of separate themselves. And the way they separate themselves is providing coaches with weekly updates and not just weekly updates of what you did during the week, but weekly updates with content, with game content, with those playlists and with those full games. And that's exactly what Trace ID was created for. Filming every game, creating a weekly playlist, and sharing it in a professional format, a college coach can then track your development in a very engaging way. The ease with which this is done through a platform like Trace ID reduces a lot of that recruiting work. But more importantly, it demonstrates a player's genuine desire to attend and play at that particular school through these constant updating and persistent actions. It reflects a player's organizational abilities, intelligence, maturity, and these are all very desirable personal characteristics of prospective student athletes. There's a lot of things you can pull up from video, but actions like this, when players are recruiting schools, are really extremely desirable. Every coach wants those type of players, the determined ones, the mature ones, the organized ones. They're the ones that are going to make great student athletes. So I call it shareability. I don't know if it's a word, but Trace's shareability allows players to recruit schools. And that slide that you see in front of you is kind of one of my recruiting main points. Is the more that you recruit a school, the more likely it is they will recruit you. And it may not be 99% true, but if players use this as a guide, if they knock on a lot of schools' doors, they're going to get an answer. And sometimes that answer isn't always positive, that maybe there is an opportunity at a school. But by having the ability to knock on it with new content and open these doors, that's okay. Because now you can go to the next door. And I really like that. A lot of the times the recruiting process seems to be out of our control. And I just went through it as a parent for a golf kid, and man, that's completely different than soccer. But having a platform like Trace ID and all this virtual information, all the data, it gives players a sense of control. It gives parents a sense of control. When one door closes, 10 more can open, because you guys have the content now and the ability and ease to share it that can create those opportunities. Any particular questions about maximizing, Charles?
Yeah, one question. Should you send training video content in addition to game footage?
Good question. I think a lot depends on the type of that training evaluation video. If it's not necessarily in a competitive situation, I wouldn't. If it was, an unopposed exercise or a rondo with no direction or something like that, I don't necessarily think that's a good way to gain attention. If it is a small-sided session at the end where intensity is high and the competitive level is high, I think that's a possibility to include, but I would keep your playlists and your game information more on a true competitive environment.
And a question about the timeline for all of this. When should players be thinking about all of these various steps? When should they be thinking about getting in touch with coaches? I know it's a bit different for boys and girls, but can you walk through a little bit of the timeline from, maybe 7th or 8th grade through high school of when they should be thinking about things?
Yeah, there are a lot of varied answers to this, and I think every college coach may tell you something a little bit different. So I'm going to tell you, as a club coach, a college coach, and a parent, is that I feel, regardless of gender, you should start the process within your freshman year. Not necessarily updating weekly or reaching out in that way. Obviously, there are NCAA rules for communication and things like that that you have to be aware of. But I think from the player's perspective, that the more that they engage in the process, the more control they have and the more understanding that they have of it. But they also begin to ask big questions. What type of school? What does this school do? What about this coach? Playing style? All those things I think are really good to have conversations with early in the process, so that when it really heats up, girls sophomore year, boys a little bit later in the sophomore year, junior year, they have a really good working understanding, one, of the process, but number two, of what they want out of their student athlete experience. I think starting it late, you may end up with different types of answers as opposed to maybe some more educated answers the earlier you start it. So I suggest getting involved. And what I mean by getting involved is coming up with target lists of potential schools. Division doesn't matter. You're trying to match, obviously, your academic, social, geographical aspects to a decision, and engage in it. Start sending out trace IDs. Start attending some ID camps. And you'll go through this process, and it's kind of a self-education process. You're going to find out what you like from a coach. You're going to find out what you like from a program. You're going to find out what you like from a school. And that's what we all want at the end, is we all want this great fit. And the only way to do it is if you have experience. And I think the earlier you start with that experience, whether it's trace IDs and ID camps, the better decision you're going to make as a student and as an athlete, and then as a family.
Awesome. And how do you think coaches would like to be contacted? Are their emails generally available, or should you think of calling the athletic department? And a related question was what to write in an email. Just on that note, we have a great article with a sample email that I'm going to put into the chat and send after this webinar as well. But if you could talk about, how should you contact coaches, Tim?
I think your first outreach, like when I started coaching college, it was by letters. And it's funny, I hear people sending letters now in addition to emails. So I do think your first initial method of contact would be email. And in these introductory emails, it's important to include, and you have to personalize them. And that Trace Academy article does a very good job of outlining that. Is you want to make sure that you reiterate why you want to go to school there academically. Do you want to reiterate why you want to play there? What's the personal attraction to there? And those are the two big things to hit right off the bat. But it's not just one email. And I go back to Trace ID, and I go back to this shareability aspect. Is before like a National League event, college coaches get 200, 300, 400 emails, and all from that event across maybe 2 or 3 different age groups. And there's no humanly way possible they can cover all of those. And so what they do is they begin to kind of tier them or prioritize them. They're going to prioritize those players that spent 2 to 3, 4 months recruiting them prior to this event, that they updated them weekly through their Trace ID, that they're going to give them kind of the benefit of the doubt or put them at the front of the line and separate themselves. And that's what you want. Like, that's the purpose of these virtual identification, or one of the purposes, is to get that live evaluation, to get that benefit, to create that kind of benefit of the doubt. And that's kind of the ease with Trace ID, to be honest, is how easily you can do it every week or every other week or after every game. And the knock is, the reason why a lot of players don't do that is they feel like they're bothering the coach, right? Oh my gosh, that coach I can't send another email to him. He doesn't want to hear from me. And that's okay. The more that they hear your name, the better. You'll get that benefit of the doubt. And then when they show up to play, when they show up to watch you play live, that's what you want. And that's where you can make your magic happen. But you got to put in the work before the game. And it's just like training, right? It's the same thing, same premise. You got to train 3-4 times a week in order to succeed on the field. You got to work at recruiting in order to get that college opportunity. But the ways that which you work, the efficient ways you work, depend on your platform. And I really do like how Trace ID allows players to do that.
Great. And we have a question from a junior. So as a junior, is it too late to start thinking about some of the things you just discussed, or what kind of last minute advice would you give someone late in the recruiting process?
So for the classes of 21, for 2021 and 2022, I really feel sorry for you guys. COVID has affected those two classes much more so than obviously the 23s and the 24s, since they're just beginning their process. So I feel really bad because it is tough. But I do know that there are still a lot of opportunities out there. It's going to be weird, and it may be a little bit delayed, obviously with college soccer switching to the spring, the extra year of eligibility, the extra COVID year, how that's going to play some roster management issues with coaches. But I still know there are coaches recruiting at all levels. I know that there's opportunity. You just have to find a way to knock on as many doors as possible and kind of expand your footprint a little bit, and reach out to schools that maybe fit your academic and geographic and social and cultural wants and desires, and then athletic, but expand that a little bit. And I think you'll be surprised at exactly what opportunities are out there. Don't give in to the doom and gloom. I mean, and you hear it, but I spoke to two college coaches today, a Division I and Division II, and they were both asking about 2021s and 2022s. So I know that it's out there. You're just going to have to work a little bit harder, but with a platform like Trace ID, you don't have to work harder. You can just work more efficiently and still match what you want from your student athlete experience.
And this is from a player. What advice would you have for someone playing on their club's third or fourth team? Is there something specific that they should be doing to stand out?
No, I think some of my best players never came off of top teams or necessarily the most, named clubs. I think and this is a life lesson too, is if you're on a second or third team, you can still knock on doors and you can still see if you can get evaluation. Even if it is no, at least you tried. And then you can go to the next school and the next school and the next school. So I think it's one, yes, be realistic. Talk to your club coach, about direction. And then I think let the schools decide if there is an opportunity within that program. Don't be classified or don't just give into, yeah, I'm on the third team, no one will want me to play college. There's great schools regardless of level. Junior colleges, NAIA, Division III, Division II, Division I. There's a lot out there. And if you work and you're going to find the right opportunity that matches. You just got to kind of, spread your wings just a little bit further, but don't let your team or your placement on a team inhibit your search. I mean, I think I love the college recruiting process. I love, obviously, the student athlete experience, but I also love what it teaches our kids. It teaches them some great life lessons, right? It teaches them, determination, grit, reaching out, all the things, dealing with adversity, all the things that they're going to go through in their post-collegiate lives, they're learning these lessons through the recruiting process. So I encourage everybody to go through it. I really do. I think it does that much for them long term, and it's that important. So don't give in, regardless of what team you are in a tiered club. It's always worth going through the effort. You just never know who might think you're a diamond in the rough.
Awesome. Awesome. So we have a few more questions, but we're going to wait till the end to answer those. Let's continue with the presentation, Tim.
Okay. The last bit that I do want to touch upon a little bit is social media. And social media is playing an increasingly important role in recruiting. COVID has accelerated this by quite a bit. We know that, well, I mean, now that Generation Z, which is obviously in this recruitable age here, kids have grown up on social media, and they've been very well educated by teachers, by parents and coaches about what not to do on social media. We also know that college coaches are using it more and more in their research of a prospective student athlete. They're finding them on social, trying to find out what their online persona is and see if that matches with their core values and with what they want in a prospective student athlete. So if we know that college coaches are already going to be on our social media, and we know what not to do on social media, we should really take advantage of this. We need to build our brand, essentially, and use social media as another online virtual recruiting opportunity. But before we start driving college coaches to Insta or Twitter, right, we've got to make sure that we have kind of our house in order. We got to make sure that our profile contains all the necessary relevant recruiting information like grad year, club, position. We also need to make sure that you are following, regardless of social media platform, that you are following their entire staff individually, the school athletic program, and that soccer program specifically. It's important. It really is important. They've got to know that you're truly engaged in them in order for them to be engaged with you. So make sure that your social media house, all those little details are taken care of. Then once you've got kind of that all ready to go, now you can maximize your social media. And the key to doing that is posting consistent, engaging visual content. And again, Trace's personalized individual moments are perfect for this. Post after each game. Tag teammates. Post a teammates moment, letting them know how good they did. Display, by posting, is kind of the action that you're displaying your personal characteristics, what type of teammate you're going to be when you get to college. So with a platform like Trace ID that has the individual playlists, the full game videos, the player performance data, and the about section, that's an all-in-one major platform, right? And now you've got your social media. And so now, even though there's a lot of live opportunities that have been missed showcases, league games, etc., look at all the different ways you've now found in your control to recreate those. And so in a way, I think this COVID recruiting landscape has really been a positive. You know, yes, we've missed a lot, but I think it really does help student athletes gain a little bit more power in this, a little bit more engagement, a little bit more reach, all through this virtual identification process. So I do think, after everything kind of settles, I do think this is a really good thing overall for the recruiting landscape.
One question, is it okay to have a dedicated recruiting social media account in addition to a personal account?
Yes, I think that's fine, but remember, coaches are going to find you, and so it's really important that when you're creating your Insta or you're creating Twitter, that your profile name or your handle is as close to your name as possible. And I understand that you want to have kind of your personal one and then your professional one. They'll probably find both. So I think it's okay to have just one and use it. And eventually, when name, image, and likeness, which is a whole nother workshop, comes into play, you're going to want them combined in many, many ways to build your brand. So I see the value in both. I would recommend one because you're also showing some really good things about how you interact with just your friends or just your family. And those are important things from a college coach's perspective to learn, right? You're multifaceted, right? It's not, there's a lot of things that you want to display. So I think one is enough. I understand two, but I think if you're truly using social media in a positive way, having one is probably the path.
Great. I think that's it for social media related questions, but we're going to move on to general questions that we received throughout. So I guess the first one, do coaches value certain leagues more than others, such as ECNL or MLS Next or Academy? What are your thoughts on the differences between leagues?
Um, in all transparency, I think a lot of college coaches fell into the recruiting by a league camp that, and some of it was financial concerns that they would just go to certain events and that's where they would do the bulk of the recruiting, not necessarily based on a talent pool, but maybe it was a regional event or whatever. I do think that the one group, well, there've been another positive of this kind of COVID affected landscape is that you're going to have college coaches look at a wide variety of platforms, much more so than before, and largely because of this virtual identification. I think this virtual identification breaks down a lot of those stereotypes. And you're finding college coaches find players in all leagues, not just one over the other. But that also falls down, I think some of that responsibility to break down some of these stereotypes falls back to players. And back to that statement that I had on one of those earlier slides, the more that you recruit a school, the more likely it is they're going to recruit you. So regardless of what competitive platform you're playing on, if you spent time recruiting those schools over a long, 3, 4, 5 months, regardless of what event you're playing in, they're going to probably come watch you play. And so I do think you're going to see kind of a shift in the landscape. I think a lot of those barriers will be broken down, and I think you'll see college coaches being more efficient in how they recruit off campus and where they recruit off campus, and be able to find players or look for players that in leagues that they didn't maybe necessarily look at 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago.
Great. And can you use Trace Video in Scouting Zone or other recruiting platforms?
No, Trace is shared by a link. So if that particular platform is able to host a link from a different source, then yes. As far as integrating video within a Trace ID, it doesn't. Trace ID is an all-in-one platform. So we don't, it doesn't necessarily fit very well. There are a couple solutions, some kind of knock around ones that were able to help with that. But above all, Trace Video is for Trace ID.
Great. Do you recommend playing club soccer or high school soccer in the spring, or does it depend on certain factors for girls soccer specifically?
This spring is going to be really, 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 really unique. We know that collegiate soccer, they're going to play their competitive season in the spring. So whether it's high school or club, these coaches are going to have some really interesting decisions, especially given maybe some COVID restrictions or financial or budgetary. Are they going to want to leave their team on a weekend in their competitive season to go recruit? And if they do leave campus and go to some event or showcase, they may have to quarantine before coaching their team again. And every school is going to be unique. Some schools are going to do it, some schools aren't. So and I think you'll see colleges probably do a lot more high school recruiting this spring because of situations and circumstances. Um, I know I'm not really answering the question because it's just unique probably to that particular player's situation. I think regardless of your choice, my biggest concern would be overuse. Playing club and high school at the same time, I think is, obviously we know at least for fatigue and possible injury, I would be aware of that. But from a showcase perspective, I think it would just depend on where you want to go, the access to those schools, and their ability to leave campus to recruit, regardless of whether you're playing club or high school. So I didn't really answer the question. I think that's probably going to be your particular answer. But I think you will get benefits from both, to be honest. This spring for sure.
And do you have to be at a big public school or a big club to go D1?
No, you can become D1, become D1. You can make it to a D1 school regardless of small club, big club. A lot will depend back to that phrase. The more that you recruit a school, the more likely it is that they're going to recruit you. And coaches love finding players outside these big clubs sometimes. So it really is a matter of that player, building their brand and showcasing themselves regardless of their club, in order to, get that Division I attention. They'll want to see you play live, and you can still do that outside of your club by going to ID camps and competing on the same levels as some of those other players from bigger clubs. So there are ways to kind of equal that playing field, but don't let the size of your club or what league your club plays in from diminishing your ability to try and go get the school that you want.
Great. And this is a question about getting Trace and using it. How do you go about getting the Trace devices if you want to try out the system?
So in the last slide that we have up, heading into the Greensboro National League event, I've listed the email address. And if you just email that address, our event staff will be able to answer you very quickly and provide all the details, price structure, everything else, set up, all that sort of stuff. So they're much more knowledgeable than me. So yeah, just events@traceup.com for more information.
Great. And this is the final question, unless anyone wants to add anything into the Q&A. But it's our team has used Trace, but my son's new club does not. Is there a way to upload new games to Trace if the new club is not using it?
Unfortunately, no. But maybe we can reach out and get that club to trace once again, especially now, obviously with a feature like Trace ID that really does break down a lot of barriers. It's really advantageous to players. I know being a parent, and I couldn't get our son to do a lot in the process because he had a lot of other things to do, right? He works, he's just he's just a high school kid, he golfs, he does all this sort of stuff. And sometimes when you're mixing platforms, you got video on one, you got player performance on the other, you've got communication in another. A lot of these kids, it ends up being too much, and the process becomes overwhelming. And so having Trace ID and having this new club possibly Trace and getting everything on one platform allows for an extremely streamlined workflow for a high school teenager to fully engage in this. And that's what college coaches really want, is they want players to be engaged in this process, not passive participants. They don't want, mom and dad sending emails and making highlight videos and do all that. They want it player led and player driven. And largely because that's the type of person that's coming into your program. So if mom and dad are doing it, or a third party service is doing their recruiting process, what does that say when it's extrapolated into their 4 years of college? Are they going to be passive, or are they going to be invested? Are they going to be engaged? And so how players go about the recruiting process is a really, really important interpretation for college coaches. So a platform like Trace ID gets players to engage in it. It's kind of fun. I mean, creating their weekly playlists and tagging and ordering and spotlighting themselves. Every kid loves to watch themselves. I mean, think of TikTok, right? So I think that's probably more essential. So having multiple platforms isn't ideal and actually kind of wears on players. So having everything streamlined like a Trace ID is I think ideal. I think you get the most out of it. And it's unfortunate that it's it's just not compatible, with other platforms, but I understand that. So
Awesome. Are coaches looking for you to impress in every showcase game during a 2 to 3 day period, or do they account for fatigue during the course of those tournaments?
yes, yeah. Um, every coach takes every game uniquely. Who they're playing in the showcase. Is it the third game? Is it the second game? You'll come across, situations in showcases or events where it's the team's first game and they're playing against a team where it's their second game. All those things factor, and all those things are part of the evaluation process. And that's kind of creating that context a little bit, right? It's giving them kind of a full thing. So if they see a player who is in their third game and he or she is just absolutely dominating, and it's their third game within 48 hours, then they know something, right? This kid's obviously got a great fitness base, extremely determined, loves the competitive environment, all that sort of stuff. So it is, and it works the other way. Man, this kid has played, 180 minutes in the last 36 hours. This third game, man, I don't know. There's not much left in the tank. You can kind of see it on their face. But that's also the beauty, I think, of a platform like Trace is, yes, it's great for, 3 games in a tournament, but coaches want to see this expanded out over 3-4 months, where they're seeing more of a consistent form as opposed to a 3-game snapshot, more or less. But everything is, all those conditions are taken into account for an evaluation for sure.
Great. And do you have any advice for people who are not yet in high school? Is it too early to even be thinking about this kind of stuff? This is from a player. Kudos on being on this webinar before you're even in high school.
No, I don't. I think it's important to set goals. And if college soccer is one of those goals, I think it's okay to begin the process or the journey to achieve them when you want to. I think there's certain steps that you can take now in 8th grade to prepare. Obviously, training, right? The more you train, the better you are. playing at the highest level that you can. And then I think maybe come this summer, when COVID hopefully is no longer the main point, that camps are able to happen, that you attend some ID camps. And I would think at the start, you want to attend big ID camps where there's going to be multiple colleges there that can see you kind of grow and kind of get used to your name and kind of begin the journey that way. So I think it's okay to start thinking. I think it's okay to start planning and start engaging it. And then I think come your freshman year, when your team starts tracing, you can create trace IDs and begin that part of the recruiting process. I think you're in a good position.
Great. And one final question. Can you export trace highlight clips into MP4 files or .mov files?
Trace ID and your trace individual moments and game footage are shared by links. Now, there are different ways you can take a screen record of something, which will create an MP3 or an MP4 and use it that way. But then obviously that takes up a lot of hard drive space. So we share in links. It's easier. Everyone can handle links for sure.
Great. And I'll just add to that. We are adding a feature for you to download clips for free. And so that should be coming in the next week or few weeks. So that's in the works right now. So you'll be able to share moments across social media as a way to build your player profile in creative, interesting ways as you see fit. So Tim, any final thoughts to sign off?
No, I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight to listen to me kind of babble. But as you can tell, I'm extremely passionate about the recruiting process, and I'm extremely passionate about the education of it. And when we have a tool like Trace and Trace ID, I just think it's going to create so many more opportunities for our kids. And I think everyone should have a student athlete experience, regardless of the level. So I'm excited for it, and I'm really thankful for USYS to kind of begin, a lot of the videoing and providing videoing for their players through their event. So I'm very, very happy and very thankful to be a part of this relationship.
Great. Thanks to everyone who attended, and thank you so much, Tim, for taking the time.
Great. Thank you, guys. Good night.